Historical Commission meeting of November 17th, 2022 at 5 o'clock. This meeting is being broadcast live on Glendale TV, viewable on Spectrum Cable.
Yeah, start over with your microphone.
Oh, all right. No music again to start? Got it. Okay, take two. Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Glendale Historical Preservation Commission on this Thursday, November 17th, 2022 at 5:10. Tonight's meeting is being broadcast live on Channel 6, AT&T Universe, Channel 99, Glendale TV, and Spectrum Cable. Our meetings are also streamed live in high definition on the city's webpage, glendaleca.gov/live, on youtube.com/myglendale, Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire devices, using a free app called ScreenWeave and choosing Glendale TV on the menu. Many meetings are also archived on the Glendale City website for viewing anytime at glendaleca.gov/agendas. For public comments and questions during this evening's meeting, we encourage you to please call the following telephone number, area code 818-937-8100, 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting the questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person. And our current agendas are also available by visiting our website at www.glendaleca.gov. I complete their opening statement, and now would you please call for roll call, Casey? Or Jay?
All right, Commissioner Vartanian?
Here.
Commissioner Morgan?
Here.
Mr. Yurka?
Here.
Crignani?
Here.
Chair Doom?
Here.
Everyone's here.
Thank you. Our second item on the agenda is to report that our agenda was posted outside the Glendale City Hall Bulletin Board on November 14th and in preparation for this evening's meeting. Our next item is to call for an approval of the minutes. I hope you were all able to review the minutes via email. We had a lot of stuff at our last meeting, I noticed. 4 different votes.
Oh.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I had two corrections. The first was that Francesca and Lee Smith are not the owners of 1833 Neodrara. And also, I thought it should be reflected in the minutes that I had a comment, and my comment was to object to the expectation I would recuse myself over item, I think, 7B, and that after discussion, the chair decided not to continue the item.
Duly noted.
Let me just make sure I get that. You're reminding us that you had asked for the item to be continued?
Mm-hmm.
And that the chair chose to continue with the item.
Sure.
Okay.
Any other corrections to our minutes?
I have none.
Okay.
I'll move.
Entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call for approval of minutes, please.
Just give me 10 seconds. I crossed out the wrong owners. I'm trying to find where. Yeah, okay.
I think it's at the bottom of the page on the back.
I got it.
There we go.
Sorry about that one. Some of these things will go away someday soon. They shouldn't be here now, but they will go away someday soon. Let's see, we're doing roll call, sorry. Commissioner Vartanian?
Yes.
Morgan?
Yes.
Yurka?
Yes.
Crignani?
Yes.
Doom?
Yes. Next item on the agenda is for oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. The Glendale Historical Preservation Commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there'll be no debate or decision. Jay, are there any telephone calls at this time for oral communication?
We have none?
We have none. I have not received any cards for oral communication at this time. So we will move on to board members' comments. And Commissioner Morgan, I see you come prepared. I'll let you go first.
Good evening. Good evening. I'd like to invite everybody to the Historical Society of the Crescenta Valley for this month's meeting. It's on Monday, November 21st, on 7 p.m. at the La Crescenta Center for Spiritual Living, located at the corner of Dunsmore and Santa Carlotta. And this month, we have a very exciting meeting about how Lockheed was camouflaged in World War II. A little-known World War II fact, Burbank's Lockheed Aircraft Factory was camouflaged to look like farmland from the air. Before March of 1942, our enemies had been in submarines tracking ships leaving San Francisco Bay, had shelled Elwood oil field in Santa Barbara, and we had intercepted messages about invading via the West Coast. So we had work to do, and our factories had to be safe to keep producing. Acres of netting was put over the Burbank factory that was producing warplanes. On top of the netting, fake farmhouses and trees were constructed. Runways were painted green to look like alfalfa fields. Learn from our speaker, Todd Meeker, how this deception was pulled off. Todd Meeker is a military historian at the Joint Forces Training Base at Los Alamitos, specializing in World War II Pacific Theater. Todd retired from a 30-year career in public speaking, working with different fire departments, but now he's going to tell you the exciting thing of Lockheed being camouflaged during World War II. We invite you all. Thank you very much.
When was that again, please?
Oh, it's, thank you very much, Lauren. It's on Monday, November 21st at 7 p.m. at the La Crescenta Center for Spiritual Living, located on the corner of Dunsmore and Santa Carlotta.
I gotta say, Mike, you usually give us visuals, and this one demands a visual. But,
Thank you. Any other commissioners with open comments? Wow, thank you. Okay. We have item 6, old business. 1600 Cleveland Road, Design Review Board, proposed additions, facade alterations, garage demolition, and construction of a new garage. Okay. And who's giving the report? Thank you, Casey.
I'll just,
Oh, Jay.
I'm going to jump in just to remind, since we haven't done a ton of these, that you have a few options in terms of your choices in terms of reviewing a design review case. You have the option to approve the project as proposed. You have the option to approve it with conditions that you impose, and there are a bunch of staff conditions that you can use as reference, go beyond, delete, tweak, whatever you want to do. Or you could propose it for return for redesign, which means that any conditions that you might propose are at such a level that you would want to see the project come back. So you could see whatever the new drawings were that either conform to the conditions that you're proposing or not, depending on the choices of the applicant. So, and then also this is, we're beginning to get more of these kinds of design review cases in historic districts. And so I think none of these decisions establish precedent exactly, but they do help us give direction to future applicants as they're coming in with work in districts. So if you can think about what level of change the commission finds acceptable in districts, because we are getting proposals to change things, and that's not always the worst thing in the world. And we do tell all of the people involved in the process of creating districts that we're not freezing their properties in time, that we're open to change, et cetera, et cetera. And this is, to me, an interesting case to kind of look at that issue specifically. So the more, not to focus your discussion, but the more you can include that kind of forward-looking, what works, what doesn't work, will be helpful for the applicants, of course, but then for us moving forward.
Thank you.
And then Casey is going to present. This clicker's not working, so I think we're going to have to shift.
Oh, sure. That's fine.
I tried to get it going, and unless there's, I don't see another one, so just use the arrow keys. I think that's easier than the mouse.
Cool. Oh, do you want to just turn that mic off so it doesn't get feedback? Thank you. Much taller than I. Okay, good evening, commissioners. This is the didn't get me there. Okay, this is a design review application for a proposed 1,124 square foot, one-story addition at 1600 Cleveland Road, which is a contributor to the South Cumberland Heights Historic District. The property is located on the east side of Cleveland Road. South Cumberland Heights was designated in November 2021. This application was received in June of 2022. The property is a one-story Spanish colonial style residence with asymmetrical massing, stucco cladding, a cross-gable roof with clay tiles, an arched picture window to the south, two multi-light casement windows with splayed jambs to the north, exposed rafter tails, and a circular tower near the entrance. Down the south facade is a tapered chimney as visible, as well as a slanted wing wall. And then you could see here in these photos that the south facade is highly visible from the public right-of-way. The concrete entrance porch is slightly raised with a symmetrical square pattern. There's a header beam and corbels that span the opening. You could see on the south side of the porch there's a small projection, which is an interior closet. And then on the north wall of the porch, you can see this double-leaf multi-light casement window. The DPR form for the district, when it was surveyed, did identify that the building had a paneled wood door, and then it did identify that it had a courtyard with this stucco wall. The entrance door now is a French door with side lights, and the stucco wall has been removed. It was removed by a previous owner, not by the current owner, and the current owner has expressed their desire to not replace this wall, but as it was called out as a character-defining feature, the commission may consider adding the replacement as a condition to this project. And then this is an overview of the proposed versus the existing site plans. So on the right is the existing. It's a 1,760 square foot residence, which sits generally at the center of its about 9,600 square foot lot. There is a detached garage in the northeast corner, which has an unpermitted shed behind it. The proposed project would add, as you can see on the left-hand side here, 1,124 square feet to the rear and the south facade, which mostly is retained to the rear of the building. It would replace the existing garage in roughly the same location, and then replace much of the rear hardscape with landscaping, and remove the non-original permitted shed behind the garage. So we're going to kind of walk through each facade and show you the existing versus the proposed. So these are the existing and the proposed for the primary facade, and there are kind of three main changes proposed here. The first is the replacement of those two casement windows towards the north with the splayed jambs with a singular square window. These windows are identified as character-defining features, and the alteration wouldn't meet the city's historic district guideline standards or the Secretary of Interior standards, so staff does recommend the retention of these two windows as is. The second is the removal of that small projection in the porch. It's unclear if this projection is original or was an interior closet addition from some point, but staff doesn't believe that its removal would alter the integrity of the building or its contributing status. But they are also proposing the removal of that double leaf casement window on the north wall. You can't see it here, it's not in this elevation. But staff is also recommending proposed condition that that window be retained as is. And then the third alteration that I just wanted to note, but I'll speak more in detail when we get to the south facade, is the visibility of the addition along this facade. So you can see the change at the chimney towards the right side, which is your south side. It is visible from the public right-of-way, so I just wanted to flag it here, and then we'll speak about it and propose conditions as we move forward. So then just to recap our proposed recommended conditions from staff, we are recommending retaining the existing narrow casement windows with displayed jambs, retaining the existing double leaf casement window on the north wall of the porch, and then potentially conditioning the replacement of the removed courtyard wall. So we move to the north facade. So we have a scored concrete driveway which runs down this facade, and then the portico share, which is a character-defining feature with the thick columns and the wood beams on this property. There's multiple windows on this facade. We have right under the portico share, which you can see, another double leaf multi-light casement window. And then as you move past the portico share, there are two non-original vinyl sliding windows and then two hung windows towards the back.
Casey,
These-
can I interrupt for just a question?
Yeah.
So the window that we see in the left photo that's facing us, that's identical to the one,
On the porch.
yeah,
Yeah,
the one
they-
that we couldn't see in the porch?
Yeah, so you can see that window here. So
Okay.
towards the left-hand side. That's the one where they're proposed to infill, and we are recommending that they retain as is. And so like you said, that it kind of just mirrors each other through the building on this facade. So then we have the existing versus the proposed. So the addition with the new low-pitch gable roof can be seen here towards the back of the facade and will be somewhat visible down the driveway. The double-leaf casement window on the porte cochere is proposed for replacement to a single-leaf casement window. And then I do apologize, some of these existing windows aren't drawn exactly as they are of the existing. So that top one is showing a single casement window, but it is actually that double-leaf casement. So staff does recommend the retention of this double-leaf casement. And then once you move past the porte cochere, they are proposing to infill or replace those 4 windows, the 2 non-original and the 2 hung towards the back. The hung window is an appropriate style to the house, so staff is just recommending that these 4 new windows recall the appearance of the original hung with sills, ogee lugs, and the perimeter trim that is there now. And then just recapping those conditions, retain the existing double-leaf casement window, and then conditioning that the 4 new windows should be fiberglass, double hung, 1/1, and include perimeter trim, sills, and the ogee lugs to recall the appearance of the original. And so I did just want to jump to the roof really quick since it was introduced on that north facade there, just to convey to you what they are proposing. The existing roof is the cross gable roof with non-original S tiles with a flat extension at the rear. The flat portion isn't identified as a character defining feature in the DPR form like the cross gable is, and the proposed addition would put a low-pitched gable roof at the rear, but it wouldn't be visible over the existing ridge line. The only recommendation here for the roof is that the new roof material be S tiles in the same dimension, texture, and color as the existing non-original style so that it's compatible. We move to the rear facade, which includes a non-original covered patio to the north and then a mixture of different window types. The proposed rear facade would just extend the volume of the building towards the back of the lot with the gable roof, sliding doors, and the hung window. Since the rear facade is not visible from the public right-of-way, staff doesn't have any recommended conditions for these changes. And then we move to the south facade. So as I mentioned earlier, the south facade has features that tapered chimney towards the front with flanking double-leaf casement windows on either side of it. And then along the remainder facade, there are the double hung single light windows like the north facade, and then a double leaf single light casement window towards the rear. So this is where the addition becomes pretty visible. These are the existing versus proposed on the south facade. So the addition would extrude kind of the whole volume of the building south about 4 feet, while adding the low-pitched side gable at the rear. This alters the facade's relationship with the character-defining chimney and the front roof line. The addition would also remove the casement window to the east of the chimney, as well as proposing, like similarly on the other casement windows, that casement window on the west instead of being the double leaf to a single leaf. The existing windows down the remainder of the facade would also be removed and replaced with these 3-part sliders and then a single slider at the rear. So a couple options to consider here. Yeah.
I just wanted to jump in to help you visualize. We'll show you some more slides that help with that. But if you picture this facade, it's pushed forward 4 feet toward us, viewing it from the south, toward the neighbor, but still within the setback, which may have been clear.
Casey, sorry, in the existing drawing, are those windows correctly, are they?
They are double leaf casement, so if you go back,
Right.
you could kind of see the one
Okay.
in that left-hand photo, and the center photo.
Got it.
So pretty much all the windows along, the casement windows along the front and then on the side, like on the porch, under the porte cochere, and then flanking are double leaf casement.
Got it.
And all of those windows, we are recommending condition to be retained, with a few variations on this facade. So some options. the commission could decide to approve the proposal as is, and allow the whole 4-foot, extrusion of the volume of the building to come south. The addition is logical for what the applicant's trying to achieve on the interior, more living space. And it does seek to respect the original design intent. It has that gable form. The rear gable is compatible with the Spanish colonial revival style. And we don't believe that allowing this addition would render this building a non-contributor. But since the facade is highly visible, staff does have some recommended alternatives to consider. So the second design option, Jay worked some PowerPoint magic to try and visually convey what we were describing. So as the addition would create this different relationship between the gable and the roof and the front, the commission may consider beginning the addition at the east termination of that gable. So that existing side-facing gable would remain where it is, and then that the slope of the rear-facing gable would push south 4 feet. You could see it here at the top. This is looking at it south, so you would have a wall facing towards the front, and then you would see the slope of that eave. In that bottom photo, you can see it kind of above the wing wall. And then this shows it in the floor plan. These are the two design options, top as proposed, so the entire 4-foot addition with the gable and the side gabled roof. And then at the bottom, you could see this is where the addition would stop at the termination of the existing gable. It reduces the size of the family room and the living room, but may be something to consider. Yeah?
It is, also, in the staff report, we talked about these aren't your only 2 options, of course. You have options galore. But one of them would be to not allow any extrusion toward the side, and then anything beyond that. So I just we didn't make a slide for that because it's on the existing plan, but want to just remind you those are out there.
Thank you. So as we say, these are your 2 design options, but the commission could decide to not approve any addition along the south facade and just retain the addition to the rear of the building. That is always an option. But just these are the 2 that staff has kind of come up with as recommendations, the proposed as is at the top, and then in comparison, the proposed with that pushed back addition at the bottom. So we do have a few other recommended conditions for this facade. If the commission chooses to reduce or eliminate the addition, the double leaf casement window to the east of the chimney should be retained as is. But if you approve the addition as is, then obviously it will go away. But in either scenario, we do recommend that the double leaf casement window towards the front be retained as is. And then staff does recommend deleting these 3-part slider windows. They're not appropriate to the style or the period. And instead, they should include the double hung fiberglass 1/1 windows similar to the north. And then finally, the current detached garage is in the northeast corner of the lot with a square footprint, stucco cladding, flat roof, and then this kind of like pitched tile detail over the west facade. And the proposed new garage would just be pushed back from its current location, generally minimal change to the site and in line with detached garages in the area. Staff is recommending a revision to the current design of the garage. They are proposing to just kind of put the shed roof kind of feature below the roof line over the garage door, and we are recommending to revise it to better reflect what is currently there, that kind of pitched roof detail over the west facade. So a lot of information.
Really quickly, is the new garage taller than the old garage?
It
you know?
is.
I can't really see the, no, I guess it's right in front
It
of me.
was,
It's 11.
the current garage is roughly 12 feet, and I think the
Okay.
proposed is,
The same.
if not the same, deviation in a few inches.
Okay.
And then just a curious question, do we think that detail on the original garage, the way the tiles are, kind of placed there, would that be original?
Could be.
It looks like it is. I don't see any reason to think it isn't. It's a little funky, I'll grant you that.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks like it's got some age on it.
Thank you.
Other questions, slides you would like me to go back to?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to ask about the garage door. Is that the one that we're seeing there?
Yeah, it's, the garage door is as proposed. We didn't have any conditions to change the style. It's a pretty simple style of door, which we see on a lot of these garages, a lot of times when they're altered. So staff did not recommend a different garage door for this replacement.
But, okay,
The existing door isn't original, so.
right. Okay.
What I can't see on this drawing, yeah, we would recommend panels.
Okay.
Yeah, a very simple, traditional kind of door.
Okay, that's what I was, yeah.
I
You
never
didn't know
even
what I was
noticed
talking
that
about. Okay.
there were the faint lines
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
panels there.
Yeah, I thought it was paneled. Apologies. Great, so we do have the applicant here as well, who was going to speak, so if there was no other questions for staff.
Any other questions for staff? Outside, great. Thank you, Casey.
First.
I have one blue card, I believe is the owner, Toros Balian. Would you please come forward, state your name, address, and you are allowed to speak 5 minutes to your topic. Oh, are you the designer of the project too?
Yes, I'm not the owner, I'm the designer.
Designer, oh, okay. Because I saw the name, oh, it said applicant, so I just thought that was the thing. I apologize.
It's on.
Yes, we begin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Casey, for that presentation. Thank you to Jay for working with us on this project, and thank you to all you commissioners for taking your time to be here. First of all, I just want to say we're really happy that staff has recommended approval with conditions. The owners are eager to get started on this, plan check, permitting, and start to build so they can move into the house. As noted on the staff report, the relationship between the sidewall addition on the south, the chimney, and the roof would not necessarily impact the property's contributing status to the historic district. The change would be modest, so we think that addition is not so not so bad as it may seem. The addition just protrudes 1 foot 7 inches beyond the chimney. The full addition is 4 feet off the existing wall, but that existing wall is inset from the chimney, so it would actually protrude only 1 foot 7 beyond the existing chimney. The addition is outside the required side setback and will not impact the adjoining neighbor, as noted in the staff report. One interesting note is the adjoining neighbor is approximately 36 feet from the property line, their front facade. Our addition to the side would be approximately 46 feet from the front property line, so we would be roughly about 10 feet beyond our adjoining neighbor's front facade. So we believe that that would screen some of the addition from the street. Similarly, the wing wall with the side gate at the front facade will screen some of that addition. On the north side, which is the driveway side, we do have the portico share and the driveway gate, which wasn't visible in the pictures, but there is a gate, which will limit the visibility, we believe, of any windows on that north facade. Thus, we would like the commissioners to consider not adopting conditions 1 and 3 through 6. That's it, yes.
That's your presentation? Ah, okay. Any questions for the designer from the commissioners?
I'm not sure I understand the objection to condition 4.
Condition 4.
It's up there too.
The window.
Toros,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
if you can read that.
can we zoom?
Technically, it's on the screen.
On the north.
It's the 4, I can read it.
Here, I can give you my copy.
No, I have a copy, I'm just
Oh,
trying to
okay.
find it. Yeah, I have it.
We can read it out loud for the public.
So condition 4 is at the 4 proposed window openings at the north driveway side facade to the rear of the portico share. Revise the proposal to incorporate new double-hung 1/1 fiberglass windows with OE lugs at the upper sash to recall the appearance of the existing wood double-hung 1/1 windows at this facade. Provide perimeter trim and sills to match the dimensions and overall appearance of the existing original or early windows at this facade.
So
I wasn't sure how different that was from what you were proposing. It's replacement windows.
we were proposing single hung versus what the staff report had as double hung. So that was a change.
I'm sorry, we sometimes just use double hung as we think that everything's double hung. We're fine with single hung windows because they look identical to double hung windows. So
Okay.
if that's the only objection,
That is, yeah,
that
that was a-
we shouldn't have written it that way.
Double hung is much more pricey than single hung, and they look similar.
Thank you.
We'll just point out that the difference is that only one is operable on a single hung. And
No,
the lug
the lug will be there either way.
would still have the lug. Okay.
I have a question just in terms of what staff is proposing, because I noticed that, so the two windows that are new vinyl windows, those are infill. Those will be infilled. Is the proposal for the two windows that will replace them on the north facade to have them recessed to match the other? Okay, yeah, just wanted to make sure.
Commissioner Craignotti, any questions? No. Commissioner Tanya, any questions?
None at this time.
Commissioner Morgan?
Nope.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Taurus.
Very much.
Thank you.
Any discussion amongst ourselves?
We have no callers, just in,
Oh, thank you. No callers? Okay, we have no more
usually
callers?
forget that step, so.
Okay, so I can close public comments.
I wanted to make a suggestion. Sorry, it's been a long day. And that would be, rather than tackling the whole thing at once, is maybe discussing the window retentions first, and then considering the addition at the south side and other
Sure.
features.
Without
I thought it
objection.
might be,
Go ahead.
That's the big one. Can we start with that?
with the, sure, yes, however, the south.
Yeah, because I think that might impact, well, windows to a certain degree.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But my only comment on that, and Casey, if we could go to the drawing. Yeah, south facade. I do agree with staff that on this, I have no problem with the addition, but I think it should start with staff's recommendation to start it.
Further back.
Yeah, further back. Can we see that from the front? Because to me, I just don't think the design is appropriate for a Spanish home. I don't know that we would design it that way if we were just designing the house ground up today. So I would prefer to see number 2, pushing back the proposed addition away from the chimney. And I don't know if I have consensus on that.
Oh, I agree. I mean, in fact, for me, it was between pushing it back or eliminating it. But I think, this is one of those, I mean, I think this is an interesting case to come before us as like a kind of, paving the way for design review decisions in historic districts because, as a proponent of a historic district, I too have told people, it's not to freeze properties in time and, that alterations can be made. They should meet the standards. They should preserve the historic fabric as visible from the street. But I do think that, it seems a reasonable compromise to allow that addition to go up to where it meets the gable roof. Because I agree, when you look at between 1 and 2, it really does change the spatial relations of the roof, the chimney, and the side, the wing wall, which I think is a very distinctive feature of this property. And I mean, my concern about having any of that addition there is just the kind of the lines of the roof over the wing wall, but I think having it start farther back, as suggested, is a reasonable compromise.
No, I agree with everything you've said. Again, we have always told people that you can add, you can make additions. I mean, you can even add a second story, right? So I think that is pretty minimal if we push it back. But they can still add, you're getting 4 feet along that wall. So that's where yes.
If I could just add, this image on the lower image is my creation in PowerPoint. It is not architecturally accurate necessarily. I think it's pretty close, but. So.
No, I can see that.
Yeah, I know.
I'm using my imagination.
I just have to put it out there. So.
Yeah. But it's more appropriate to maintaining the character of the front facade by stepping it back. And still, the issue is trying to allow them to meet the applicants to meet most of their project goals. And it seems that in terms of adding, this is a rather large addition. I mean, and so, it's probably eliminating, 50 feet from it. It seems very reasonable compromise to me.
No, I would agree.
Commissioner Craig Noddy?
Yeah, I would say on this particular topic, I agree with my fellow commissioners. Seeing it drawn out this way is very helpful. So thank you for that, Jay. Yeah, I would tend to agree. It really, you lose a lot on that side when by adding all that they in that drawing, it takes away a lot of the just sort of original spirit, I think, of the design. So yeah, and looking at the floor plan, I mean, I can understand wanting to gain the space inside. I'm trying to be sensitive to that in my consideration. But it is a pretty small projection from in the formal living room area that I think has a very heavy, I guess it goes back a bit further, doesn't it? It goes into the family room, right? Mm-hmm. Is that?
Just so the commission knows, if this is ultimately your decision, when we work with the architect, of course, we don't have any say over how the interiors are laid out.
Right.
But in our back and forth discussion, we can make recommendations that might find more usable space to make up for the loss of some of this area. I've already formulated a few ideas of how some fat can be cut here so it can be gained over there. And that's part of our regular process when we look at these things.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thanks.
So that's our discussion on the addition. Commissioner Morgan, I'm sorry.
I agree with the other commissioners. It's much more in keeping with, I agree with the other commissioners. It's much more in keeping with the historic district and the house itself. It retains a lot of its character by adding it that way. So I would go with the pushback proposed addition.
Back to the windows. Any comments now, Commissioner Yerk, on the windows?
Well, I agree with all of the conditions that staff proposed on the windows. I think it's very important to maintain the original fenestration at the front and wrapping around those two sides that are closest to the street. And again, this is where one could be a stickler and insist that that be carried on throughout. And I have been accused of being a stickler before, as you may have known. And I frankly, I don't, perhaps this would be an opportunity to rethink whether the applicants might want to retain the original windows where they currently exist, but I don't think that should be required for the 4 windows on the north side. And I do agree with staff's suggestion. I don't think the tripartite windows are appropriate.
The sliders?
Yeah.
Panel ones on the south wall.
Yeah.
No, I would agree with that as well. I think that's fair. Again, yes, I think what we see from the front of, what we can see from the public right away, what is there originally should be retained. They appear to be in good condition, and I don't mind. Actually, what was the proposal again for the north side? It is single hung, right? That's the architect's proposal. Yes. Okay, so I think that's
Retained.
fine, that's appropriate to the character of the house. And then, yes, agreed, on the south side, the sliders should also probably be single hung to match.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I'll just make note of there's a strange condition on this house, and that's why we said that the back windows were original/early. The front windows all have bullnose stucco. All the wood casement windows have bullnose stucco openings, or the big splayed openings at the front. And the windows at the rear that haven't been altered have a kind of a wood casing around them, which is kind of an unusual detail, not super crazy, but there was something about it that made me suggest early replacement, but they look old. So I'm assuming they're original. I'm not sure that the applicants wanted to have that look. If there's any doubt in your minds, I think it would be equally, especially at this distance from the street, to do the stucco bullnose there. It's consistent with the opening under the porte cochere, but our recommendation was to keep the trim. So, which is, the trim becomes a little more difficult when it's a modern block frame window being inserted in an existing opening.
And the bullnose is under.
Oh, the two in the middle picture?
Yeah,
Yes.
so, yeah, bullnose on the left. That's the best. Do we have this on the other side? Anything closer?
So Jay, you're saying the bullnose is easier?
It's easier for inserting a new block frame window, because when you insert a block frame window, you want the edges of that window to fit into the opening. These existing trim pieces push in from the jamb a couple of inches on each side, or an inch and a half on each side. It's totally doable, but what we don't want to have is like trim just tacked on to the
Right.
front of the stucco.
I think
So
bullnose is
if you left any
appropriate.
latitude
Yeah.
for when we're working out the details with the architect to, if there is a problem, if you gave us latitude to change it, that would be helpful, but I don't know if it's totally necessary.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think that seems,
Seems appropriate to me.
yeah. If that's something they want, then that's,
And then can I just quickly make a note on item on condition number 5 that we just also, I'm sure you'll be consistent, but we didn't write in Ogie lugs on the sash, just, I'm sure you're going to make sure there's consistency throughout. It just wasn't specified.
Provide double hung 1/1 windows with the Ogie look.
You mean consistency, single hung instead of double hung?
Single hung, but with the lugs.
With the lugs. Yeah. Thank you.
That's for number 5?
Yeah.
It's
I
very
mean,
nice that
it's
most of the
just a-
companies have lugs now for
Good.
the
Right.
historic replica windows, so.
Yeah. That's great. Makes it a little easier.
Any other commissioner comments?
so Casey, was there a photo, there's the photo where we could see that one window that's opposite this window here?
The porch window?
Yeah, that one. On the right, the picture on the right, is that an old photo or is that?
That is the photo from the Historic
DPR.
District Survey.
Okay, so that's why we see the wall there.
That you can see the stucco wall.
Yeah.
Um,
You said that's already been removed?
It was removed by the previous owner, and the current owners did express that they would prefer not
Keep
to.
it off, yeah.
Their children do play in the front yard there, and it's just like an easier
Yeah.
access to get to them.
Yeah. Okay.
But
Jay, that planner obviously is not an original feature, I would guess, right?
Right, it was there at the time of designation,
Oh, it was.
yeah.
Okay.
Which doesn't mean you can't condition it, but I think we should,
All I was thinking was maybe to stucco it and not make it be the brick that
Well,
doesn't
is
really.
it there today, though? Do we have a long shot of the front of the house? Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, I don't know. I thought it would be nice to, in a way, to harken back at least to that garden wall that was there before.
well, that could be, that could be a condition you add.
I'm going to throw that out there and see if anybody else bites, but
One thing we'll have to do, it looks like it's a pretty stable, a lot of those really low walls aren't super stable, so I don't know, but these are
Yeah, I mean, I guess if
hefty
it's just some
blocks.
stacked blocks, then maybe not. But if it's,
I'm sure they're mortared together, so.
Yeah.
No grout there.
My preference would be to just leave it as is.
Although I agree with you, it would look nice.
All right, at this time, the applicant will have 2 minutes for a, oh,
Nope, there's
I'm sorry.
more. The
There's
garage.
more. Oh, wait, there's more.
Yeah.
I thought we had the windows on the south side. Okay, the garage now?
Oh, I thought we had discussed the windows
Yeah,
on
I
the
thought we
south.
did too.
yeah, right, she just wants to talk about the garage.
Oh, go right ahead.
Oh, well, I liked the idea of retaining that distinctive sort of angle at the roofline, but and as you know, I am a stickler, but I can see, I can understand the desire to move the garage back and create more space, especially with the addition that is now moving closer to it. So is there any, I would like to see them retain the tile if it's possible for reuse. Yeah.
Yeah, the interesting thing, the tile on the garage, I think, is two-piece older tile than what's on the house. You know, it's possible to do that. There's, you know, a percentage damage tile anytime you do that. I don't think the tile kind of does the return back. If it did, that would open up the opportunity to not have that return and use some of those tiles. So we could certainly, and then we could reuse as much as possible and match. That, you know, I think that'll actually be easier. The one-piece S tile is harder to do at the edges like this, so. Although this is pretty clunky looking itself, so I don't know what's going on with this little roof. It's strange. So it's.
I loved it.
I feel like I've seen that before. And if it's not totally flat behind it, it could be sloped, but it wouldn't necessarily have tile on it. It would just be roofing material, regular roofing material.
So would you all support that? Is the staff condition to maintain the distinctive roofing with a condition to retain and reuse the tile?
Yeah.
Where possible?
Yeah, I don't think that's such a huge change.
Yeah.
It's kind of in the spirit of what they've done there anyway.
Okay, the windows, the south side, the garage. Looking at the recommendations or comments on any other parts of the house.
Sorry, can we just go back a minute? Are we saying you want them to salvage those tiles and rebuild it the same?
If they're salvageable, to the extent possible.
Oh, okay, and if they're not?
He says that in here, replicate the S tile.
Or what are we looking at?
So if they can't save,
Where are we on? Sorry.
The garage is condition 9. But I
To
think
have the tile roof portion match
Match
the
the
design
design.
proportions and placement of the corresponding feature. Right, but where do we talk about the tiles? Did you guys talk about
we
the
didn't
tiles? Oh, you
specifically.
didn't talk about the
was
tiles.
proposing adding and salvaging the existing tiles and reusing the ones that were salvageable.
Or maintain new tile similar to the current tile.
That's for the house.
Well,
That
but-
S tile.
Well, I think you're asking if
garage.
we can't salvage enough for any of the tiles, we would use new two-piece tiles at the garage. We'll leave the one-piece tile at the house. From that distance, it's not super discernible.
That'd be awkward? No?
It's the way it is now, and
Okay.
it was
Yeah.
only something I noticed, you know, kind of close and personal.
next you were
so-
trying.
I'm okay with it.
Okay with the condition to reuse?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
And I'll do a recap at the end so
Great.
that anyone,
Okay. He always does.
or Casey will
We
do a
appreciate
recap
that.
at the end. I apologize, yeah.
All right. Commissioner Yerka, any other comments?
The only thing I would say is that I would leave it to staff and the applicant to work out about how to handle the kitchen counter, the kind of window. Yeah.
Yeah, the best way we've been able to do that is with casements that have a fake meeting rail on them. And at that distance, again, it's not super visible, but it kind of, the scan across it flows pretty well.
That makes sense.
We've just
I'm
heard
fine.
from so many people that the effort to lift a hung window when you're
Yeah.
leaning over the counter is so,
It's hard.
So for non-historic houses, we kind of let sliders go when they're kind of pushed back, which goes a little bit against the window guidelines, but we have latitude at the far sides of facades. so-
Right. Yeah, no, I'm okay with that too. It's practical. And it will look right. Or appropriate.
Mr. Morgan, any further comments?
Nope.
Commissioner Cognati, any further comments?
No, I'm good.
Commissioner Vartanya, any further comments?
No further comments. I just want to thank Jay and Casey for doing such a great report for us and laying everything out so clearly. I think it made it a lot easier. I'm sorry there are so many conditions, but I think everything makes sense. And it sounds like the applicant and owners are willing to work with the conditions.
Well,
And
we're going to find out.
We're going to find out, exactly.
I was going to say, I think, I want to commend the design too. I think, this may look like a lot of conditions, but I think they're really not that many, and they're all kind of tied into the same idea. I think it's a really, really nice design overall, and I appreciate that you really worked with the style of the house and didn't try to fight it too much, for lack of a better phrase. So anyway, thank you.
It's a beautiful house. I mean, it's just a beautiful house, absolutely charming, and you haven't lived there very long, so congratulations on having gotten it. It's a tough market, and it's really lovely.
I agree, we only saw the street view, but it's a cool-looking house in the street, from what we saw. And it's now time for a rebuttal from anyone?
Just to clarify, we
yes.
don't give applicants the opportunity to rebut.
Rebut,
But
oh.
if you saw someone squirming in the audience, which I didn't catch in my peripheral vision, sometimes the commission or the design review authority will choose to reopen the hearing just to hear from the applicant. They may have something to say.
Okay.
If you didn't see anyone doing that, you don't have to.
All right, I was just reading my script. I apologize if I used the wrong word. Would the applicant should we reopen the public open communications for any word from the applicant? No? You're set? Okay. I saw no waving hands or anything, so we will not. Okay. I'd like to say that I love reading the report, even all the conditions. You have a great relationship with the English language. It leads to an awkward relationship between the roof and the chimney. That was fun to read. And depict displayed jams. That was just displayed jams. That sounded cool too.
Blew your mind.
They were great. Is now in time for any further discussion, a motion or further comments?
Yeah.
Oh, you're reading through. I'm sorry. Yeah, read it through.
Read back the, yeah. No, I would read through anything that was changed.
So the only changes that I have was on condition 4. We put that it was appropriate to do bullnose or that perimeter trim, working with the applicant. And then condition 9, we're going to add to retain and reuse the tiles where possible, and filling where there's damage with 2-piece tiles. Do you have anything?
Yeah, we'll reword conditions, all of the conditions as needed to make sure that we include that the windows are single hung and with lugs. You didn't just say that,
I didn't, but I have.
I think, okay, we'll rework those conditions. We'll add a condition regarding the garage tile to salvage to the extent possible, match whatever isn't usable, and keep that intact as part of the same condition where we recommend redesigning it to keep that feature. And I think that's all
That was all I had, yep.
Okay.
And then I guess just the decision to push the addition back.
Yeah, we should actually make that.
That's condition 1.
Yeah, it was kind of like we got to choose.
Yeah,
Okay.
we gave you options there, so we'll reword that to make that super clear.
And then are we just approving with conditions, or are you suggesting we have it come back, return?
These are pretty modest changes, so I
Yeah.
think we can handle that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve the addition with the conditions noted by staff and the changes discussed today. That seem good enough?
I'll second.
Make a motion to approve this with staff conditions.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Before we get there, the planter wall at the front, stucco,
it's-
leave it as is. Does anyone? That died? Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
A really quick death, Jay. That's why you didn't remember it. It was
Sad,
fast.
but it happens.
Struck down.
Commissioner Kamadi, you have a motion to approve with staff conditions? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, staff conditions and the conditions we discussed here, the modifications to the
Modifications we added to the staff conditions. Very good.
And then I think Lorna seconded it.
Yes.
Okay, moved and seconded. Now in time for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Cragnani,
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian,
Yes.
Commissioner Yurka,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
and Chair Doom.
Yes. Aye.
5 yeses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And
you
enjoy
very
your
much.
home.
Good luck with your new home.
Now the real fun begins.
Yes. Remodeling.
Now the real fun begins.
Love
Good
what-
luck with the city. Bye. Take care.
Night.
Bye-bye.
Any new business to share with the agenda? As you guys play musical chairs over there.
There's no new business.
No new business. Item 8, Community Development Department updates. Letter A, discussion regarding the Mills Act for Historical District Contributors Process. That was a mouthful.
Okay, so this is following up on last month's hearing item where we looked at 2 applications for Mills Act contracts for contributors. I said in my note to you something very important that, thanks. This is an update on last month's item about Mills Act, about the 2 applications we have for Mills Acts for contributing properties in historic districts. And in my note to the commissioners, I made it emphasize that we have to be very, very sure that we do not talk about any of those discussion items, about those specific properties at all tonight. We cannot do that, so please don't go there. And what I wanted to do is, what happened last month was in the discussion about the 2 specific items, it became clear that there was some confusion on the part of the commission or not remembering because of the timeline, the extended timeline between the first time you considered this and when we were actually bringing applications to you. I put together a bunch of very wordy slides that I don't want to read all of, but they may help guide the discussion. And this is basically just a reminder of where we've been. This has already been vetted by HPC. It's been seconded and approved by City Council, so we're not in a position to change the process right now. That could happen in the future. But just as a reminder of some of the issues and the timeline, you know, everything started in 2016 when City Council asked that this process be created. And it took, we didn't have any applications for the longest time. And then once we got an application and then another, that kind of kicked me into gear to get moving on this. And so just as a reminder, the process that's been outlined has been pretty consistent from the time that council first heard it, where we gave them a menu of options. Consider this, could we extend this to non-contributors, or will this only be for contributors? And so they discussed that and gave us guidance in terms of valuation caps, the number of applications that would be processed per year. They called that a hard cap for valuation and a soft cap for the numbers, because the numbers could change as staff time became available to do more than up to 2 contracts for contributors and up to 4 contracts for Glendale Register properties. So we basically said, hey, we can easily process 6 contracts a year. If we can do more than that, we'll do that. And then the balance would be based on whether it's Glendale Register or Historic District contributors. So going back to the first report, and because this was generated by City Council, they asked for us to come back to City Council, so HPC wasn't involved at that point. And then when we kind of had the plan ready to roll, that's where we brought it to HPC on August 20th, 2020, so a year and a half ago or so.
Jay, can I ask a question?
Of course.
So, because I'm looking at the report from August 20, and it says, staff proposes a series of recommendations to implement city council's direction. When was that direction? Was that the 2016?
That was 2016, and then we brought it to HPC, and HPC approved the direction that staff proposed at this hearing. And then we brought that to City Council when we gave them a broad update on lots of historic district issues.
Okay.
And we basically said what HPC had approved.
Yeah.
Okay. So like I said, I don't want to read these because that's just horrifying. But the last paragraph is, the goal is to identify and prioritize properties in which a tax reduction benefit can help offset the cost of significant work that will in return provide a tangible benefit to the city by restoring historic features and/or addressing issues that could impact the property's ongoing safety or viability. So that's kind of the essence of the direction that we proposed and was approved. And then when we went to City Council in January 2021, following up on the HPC meeting, this was just one part of a much bigger staff report, but we reminded them that they established the policy in 2016. We did remind them that this was reviewed by HPC, but I just took this as the kind of introductory paragraph. Establishes a new policy for property tax reductions for contributing properties in designated historic districts. Previously, contracts were only available to owners of Glendale Register designated properties. Council reviewed a series of options prepared by staff. This goes back to 2016 for the new program. And the issue was, because there are so many contributors, we wanted to find a way to prioritize which applications might be more worthy than others. The word competitive became a question last month. That word was used in the report for council, but whether it's competitive, prioritized, ranking, the idea was basically some applications may give more bang for the buck to the city than others, and that would be a factor that both HPC and council could be weighing in their determination. Again, this is a list that kind of has been in each of the staff reports, including last month's, talking about the fact that it's for contributors that aren't eligible for the register. We have the valuation cap of $1.5 million for single family, the number of contracts that could be processed per year, prioritize up to 4 Glendale Register properties a year, whether inside or outside districts, prepare up to 2 contracts for district contributors per year with possible additions. We said we were going to establish an annual application submittal and processing schedule, which we did prior to last month's meeting. And so we created a new historic district contributor Mills Act application that included more specific information about the work plan, the costs of the various work plan items, the schedule that they'd be performed under. And then we also submitted or determined a submittal process for the materials that we would ask for, and then created a review system that I'll go over in just a second that we did look at last month, so I don't know that we need to talk about it that much. This is really just a refresher, because what we'd like to do is bring back those 2 applications. And I can't promise that's going to happen in December, because there's a lot of year-end stuff we're trying to do. So it could be January, February, but it'll be fairly soon that we'll bring it back, so keep this active. And then of course, if a property were to receive the contract, it would extend to the entire property rather than just the parts visible from the street like we have for most other Mills Act properties. So this is a list of the submittal requirements: a grant deed, the legal description. We need a tax bill, so we can make our estimates of so we can do the apples to apples comparison of the financials of the different applications. Photographs and a photo key. The important thing here is not just to give us information at the time of the first hearing, but over the course of every 5 years, we're going to ask the applicants or the owners to update those photos, and that's going to be one of the ways we inspect properties per the requirements of the state. Occasionally, we will still have to go out for in-person, so. We asked for a building inspection report that would also be updated, and I forgot to amend this. When HPC looked at this, and we had recommended initially a 5-year cycle for the update of the its building inspection and the termite report, and the commission recommended a 10-year cycle for those, so that I'll make sure that's clear in all of our materials. But I forgot I was going to edit this to show that, and I obviously forgot. Same with the building report, we're asking for a termite report. And the important thing about these two items is, and both of the applicants, I'm not supposed to talk about them, so I'll just speak more generally. It would be possible that someone would look at a building inspection report that gives them a laundry list of 57 things to do and think, oh, those are the things I need to do for my Mills Act. What we're really looking for in both the inspection and the termite report is significant issues that are, and those inspectors wouldn't notice the restoration things that we look for, but they would notice possibly significant structural issues, significant electrical deficiencies in the system, that sort of thing. So, and this is all just talking about what the staff level review is. Once this gets to HPC and or council, you can look at these lists and say, no, we think this one's valid, we disagree. You know, there's going to be as much discussion as is needed to figure out what the balance is for each application. And then one of the most important things is the work plan that the applicants will indicate. As you know, for the Glendale Register, we ask for a work plan. It's a little loose in structure, but we do put conditions on the contract itself when we find problems. When we have a work plan for a contributor, that's going to be included as part of the contract. As I assume it's going to be an exhibit, we'll work that out with legal. And so everyone who goes through this contractual process is going to be bound to follow this. If they deviate from it in any significant way, we'd bring them back to HPC, which may or may not be gracious in granting more time to complete work, so you'd be able to hear the applicant or the owner's situation and determine what's appropriate. We determined that, and this was supported by HPC and council, that any work completed prior to the contract date can't be included in the work plan. For this year's applicants, we waived that because of different situations of work that had been taking place, but in the future applications, we're not going to waive that. And then we out of hand remove certain types of work that are common to all property owners, whether they're historic or not. We didn't think that anyone should be advantaged with a tax reduction because they have to do the same exact kind of work that every other property owner has to do. So the main and most obvious one is painting. We also include roof replacement in that, with a caveat that we may encounter a house where the roof is in such horrible disrepair that that would suggest that other things might be also, so that the combined effect of repairing and restoring all of those things would have a significant change on the property that would benefit the city. So all of that's in your hands and council's hands in terms of determining what level of anything beyond normal kind of home maintenance would require. We looked at the point chart last time, so I'm not going to go over this specifically. This is fairly broadly drawn and fairly simple in terms of points. I originally pictured this having more points for things and trying to figure out, well, does this get 3 points or 4 points or 10 points? And realize that that's not very objective ultimately. So this tries to be as objective as possible. When we look at it as it plays out in the calculation that we do to create this kind of objective point score for each application, we base that. First, we determine how much money someone is, the person receiving the most average Mills Act tax reduction, which we're looking at is about 50%. What would their tax savings be over 10 years? So we calculate that based on the valuation of the house. And then we look at the expenditure that's presented in the work plan. We calculate the tax savings. Well, we then look at the tax savings. Then we create a ratio between expenditure versus tax savings and develop a certain number of, or we develop a ratio, and then we multiply whatever work plan points an applicant gets by that ratio. And you can see here that, you know, the greater the expenditure raises the level of your points, because that's investment into the city, into a historic place. Well, it's not I should always remind us that these houses aren't individually historic. They're historic because they contribute to a district. But nonetheless, this seemed like a pretty straightforward assessment system. I think it's very straightforward. I know some may not.
Excuse me.
Yeah, so these are just two examples of how it plays out based on either work plan points or cost. And then we established this schedule, which we didn't meet this year, but we plan to meet next year, 2023, where we accept contributor applications through the 31st of May. We're going to be updating our website soon to make sure that everything is up there. So before the end of the year, the website's going to be updated. All the materials will be there. We'll also have a better kind of set of instructions for the contributors specifically. And that might help avoid some of the confusion of putting like every last item from your inspection report on your work plan. We'll try to make that as clear as possible. But people are still free to put whatever they want in their application. In June and July, we're going to finish up our review of those applications. And then in late summer into September, we're going to bring those to HPC and City Council. And October, December, we'll get these ready to roll for review by City Manager, get the contracts ready, and get everything recorded before the 31st of December. And I think that was my last slide, yeah. So that's just a recap. I don't know if that answers all of the questions or confusion that may have been part of the discussion last time, but we can obviously discuss wherever you are confused.
Jay, am I remembering correctly that you said at the last meeting that City Council didn't review the specifics of the point system and the expense to tax reduction ratio?
Yeah.
Okay, so
They
that,
directed us to create that system,
okay.
so.
And did
Directed
that,
you to create a system, right? Okay.
Became
That
that
became that.
in 2016?
No, in
In
no,
2020.
in 2021, they
Okay.
reviewed the idea of us
Sorry,
doing that. I didn't have
yeah.
like the system to hand to them
Okay.
at that point, but the basic concept was there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I have some thoughts.
By all means.
So I believe, I'm trying to think if I was chair of preservation advocacy for TGHS, or if I was just on the board when we proposed initiating a MILSAC contract system for historic district contributors.
So what you're saying is this is your fault.
I'm
just
saying
kidding.
I take some of the credit, but for the good parts. And I believe in my 6 years on the board that the amount of kind of email and comments that was generated for this item, the only thing that came close from our membership was that the city, rather than the developer, select the consultant who prepares an environmental impact report. This was very, very popular among residents, and not only those who live in historic districts, but it had a huge amount of support. The way that we had conceived it when we proposed it was not that the only or the highest and best use of the contract was to pull a property from the brink of collapse. And I think that this accorded with the view that you expressed, Chris, last month, was what people give the city in exchange for that Mills Act property tax reduction is a commitment to preserving their property sort of 360 degrees the way that they would preserve an individual property for perpetuity. And not just what's visible from the street. So the Mills Act contract is an incentive to a higher standard of preservation. And, I think that has a lot of value. I mean, one of the things that has come out is despite the new historic preservation ordinance, property owners are often still allowed to replace their windows, even if they're in perfect working condition and are original. This is a way to stop that from happening. It's a way to guarantee that more of Glendale's historic fabric remains intact. I don't have a problem with the point system as a way of beginning the conversation. I think it's useful to have a metric where you just sort of count the number of things that need to be done and you can assign a value. It's good to have a cost estimate for what that value is. But I think that is sort of the beginning and not the end. I do not think we should be multiplying and doing the expense to tax reduction ratio. Because for one thing, I don't think the benefit is only, the bang for your buck is only in terms of the economic value. I think it is, in this kind of commitment to preserve. And, when you look at, $50,000 over 10 years, that's a lot of money. And it is. I mean, it's a benefit. But the amount that the city gets of that $10,000 a year is 13% of 1%. So the city gets $1,300 a year of that $10,000. And so for a 50% break, it's $650 a year. This is not bankrupting the city. So I don't think, making sure we squeeze every dime possible should really be the governing consideration. It's not like this big taxpayer giveaway. I think we should have a lot more flexibility in determining, maybe the money that people have spent over a 5-year period. When are people most likely to spend this money to restore a property? It's when they buy it. And, often people will not move in because they're doing that kind of work. I don't think we want to tell someone who wants to do this, well, if you do it before you move in and before you apply, none of that is going to count toward your Mills Act contract, so don't bother. I think that we need to allow people who are doing the restoration work at the time it makes most sense to count that toward their expenditures, toward their whatever it is, our data point, the point system. So I also wanted to add that I do think there needs to be room for a subjective evaluation. And I remember, and Jay, we had kind of a disagreement about this because you made a legitimate point, which is, contributors are equal. We shouldn't distinguish among them. But when you think about a commitment to preserve a house, I think there may be a kind of property that is more unique or exceptional where, we decide, having that remain intact, as a promise for the future actually has value that can't just be measured in the amount of money that someone is spending on it. And then the final thing is just, I think, and just you had mentioned, the work that everyone has to do, and you mentioned a roof is going to fall in. Maybe that suggests other things. I do think if someone is going to upgrade a roof or anything else. I guess roof would be the primary example, to something that is more expensive and that more closely matches what it originally have looked like. I don't see why we wouldn't count that and give it credit, because it's a preservation good. And I think that's it.
Thank you.
I would just like to say that I think I agree with, certainly the spirit and the points that you made, Kathy. I have a couple of thoughts regarding the point system specifically. When you're dealing with mathematical formulations such as that, that formula, the outcome of that formula, is only as good as the data being inserted into it. And if the information provided by an applicant is not complete, specifically for the repair of something, and there's a point at which staff and the applicant are together maybe generalizing what they think it might cost, and that's a dollar figure that's now being used in this formula, that weakens the formula in my mind. If things aren't exactly right, and we don't know exactly dollar for dollar what things are going to cost, that to me sort of nullifies the value of that whole concept. Also, I feel like we're being asked to sort of consider these in a vacuum, in a way. I guess actually I want to start with, perhaps if we are going to stick with a point system, we can come up with a number that we think a house needs to rise to even be considered. And the reason I say that is because in 1 year, we could have 2 applicants that we all think would be nice additions to the Mills Act program that maybe both together have a very low total point score. And then the next year, we have a couple of applicants or even one applicant that has a very high point score, but they're up against someone that has an equal number of points. That if these things are not, if we don't have a threshold of some kind, and by the way, this is not to suggest that I'm totally advocating for the point system. I would prefer that we didn't have it, but if we're going to be stuck with it, I feel like perhaps there needs to be a threshold that a house needs to rise to even be considered. Because otherwise, you're going to have the potential for having different numbers across years. One applicant might be penalized because the prior year or another year things are different because they were up against a different house because of the nature of things being competitive. So maybe a threshold or an initial even admission to the process, or to even be considered, maybe there's a threshold for the points that they have to reach a certain point. I do think that I understand, at least I think, the spirit of this whole idea is to make this as objective a process as possible. But to Kathy's point, and really to everything that we consider is subjective. And I think about window replacements, for instance. There's on the list, the chart that had the list of the various things, there were deteriorated sashes, there were sashes that needed to be completely replaced. So we have replace inappropriate sash, repair deteriorated sash, replace severely deteriorated sash in kind. What exactly qualifies as a deteriorated sash? In my house, I have double hung windows that are supposed to go up and down. They're painted shut. They don't even line up. Thank God they're painted shut, because they don't even line up and can't latch in my mind, but they're perfectly fine. They keep the weather out and the wood is not deteriorated, but they don't function. Is that considered deteriorated? I would think it is, but I have a feeling that there's the potential that might not necessarily qualify as deteriorated. If it doesn't work, it seems to me it's deteriorated. So the potential for the attempt for things to be subjective could easily be also not objective, because I think so much of this process is subjective. I would like to try to work with staff on going back to the spirit of council's direction, learning that they didn't specifically ask for this specific point system specifically, but that there be some kind of mechanism where there feels like there is a significant reason for these properties for the owners of these properties to be helped. I think it might be able to, I think that we could consider these properties in a very similar way that we consider our registered properties already. We have, we've turned lots of projects down because, I don't know, lots of projects, but projects down because they've just been too far gone to be considered on the register. I mean, I look back on some of these and I think, well, if we had conditioned to that seller that property owner rather, that they have to change all of their windows to something more appropriate, because again, even that's something subjective, because we've had, is there a threshold for the number of windows or a percentage of the windows that can be allowed to be changed for something to still be considered a resource? Because we've had situations, well, we've got one window that, we just got to have that replaced with something in kind. But what if there's 5% of the windows? Is that our threshold for turning down a house because of too many window changes, and the replacements wouldn't be the original? There's just so many things that are subjective about this process that trying to squeeze that process into something objective just doesn't seem possible to me. And I think what was making it difficult for me was getting just very lost and distracted by the numbers and not feeling like the numbers were 100% the truth of the situation. There was just, in some cases, there was not even an estimate to back it up. So we were making decisions. Yeah, we had this point system, and we think these are kind of the numbers, and it just didn't feel genuine to me at that point. I think that's it for now. Thanks.
Thank you.
So if I
Commissioner
may
Bartani?
ask, though, how would you, if we didn't have a point system and we had two homes to look at, what would we look
jump
at?
in?
Yeah.
We have a point system. We don't have to always have the same point system. And the commission has full discretion to go against the staff recommendation or the staff use of the point system, and council does as well. So, we're trying to be objective on our end to just kind of give you, here's the houses that we think deliver the best project, the best use of the city tax break, the county tax break. And to Kathy's point, it's not just the city that loses money, GOSD loses money, county loses money. We're served by county fire sometimes. So, there's the money loss is bigger. You're right, it's still a drop in the giant bucket, but it's not just the city loss. And I can address many of these individual points if you'd like, or just talk about, not address, but talk about them. But just this idea that you're getting this point system that's written in stone and there are commandments that you have to follow isn't the intention, was never the case. So if that helps you, especially because I think we owe it to this year's applicants to move forward, and we can't institute changes just based on this discussion. This has already been vetted. I know they didn't vet the actual point system. My experience is I don't know that would have, there probably would have been commentary that could have influenced some of the votes, but they did ask that we do some sort of, or they accepted and agreed that we do some sort of objective ranking system. And the idea of ranking and prioritizing has been in this from the very beginning. I think even going back to TGHS, but I don't know if that word was used specifically. I have a note here.
Don't
a
you
memo,
dare
I guess.
turn my language from 6 years against me.
Oh, no.
No, I'm just teasing.
But anyways, to the point, and if you want, I can hit a few of these other things, or I'm sorry, yes, I interrupted Lorna.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, because I think that's a big deal that, please accept that staff is doing it this way. Please know that you have options and opportunities to look at things differently. Going to Commissioner Yurka's point about some houses may warrant more love through this system than others, I wholeheartedly disagree with that, because that automatically makes the system less fair. And when we're giving tax breaks to people, I think we have to consider equity and fairness. And if the subjective opinion is that every time a minimal traditional comes forward, the Spanish colonial is going to beat it because we like that style better, I think that's incredibly unfair to property owners in historic districts who are bound by the same exact guidelines for contributors, regardless of the beautiful Tudor and the homely little nothing that somehow became a contributor. And especially when we have pretty lax periods of significance for some of our districts compared to some cities. So we generally go way into the post-war period, where some cities would probably stay with their period revival neighborhoods and not want to step beyond that. And I'm all for going beyond it. I think that's okay, and we've done it consistently for years now. But if we're welcoming these later post-war properties into the fold of the district, I do think we should, keep them fairly considered based, and that's why this more objective look, which is blind to style, I think is helpful. Subjectively, as you vote and choose, who knows what's going to happen as you're looking and weighing the merits.
I'm sorry, before you move on, I just want to speak to the point you made about Kathy's point about that you think her position makes it an unequal playing field.
Mm-hmm.
This point system makes it a completely unequal playing field. You're rating the point system, not you, the point system is assigning points. Theoretically, the higher number of points that a property has are related to its condition. The more issues it has, the more money it needs to fix it, the higher the points will be. So we aren't necessarily looking at a property and saying, well, this one needs more work than this one. The point system is telling us this house is in worse condition than this house, so this house should be competitively more important to recognize than this house. So I think that, and I think the guidelines initially are also unequal. The $1.5 million cap, that it is only contributors and not non-contributors who are not. I would be in support of non-contributors who are in the period of significance, but non-contributors because their condition is so bad, maybe not necessarily non-contributors that are just out of the whole idea of it.
Staff's recommendation to council that non-contributors be included. Council.
I mean, I just wonder if perhaps they were not understanding.
Council,
Yeah.
and if we need
Years
to
ago.
revisit this, but I think we have to.
Well, so I'm sorry, just so I can finish. Just the point is that I think that the point system, as it is now, creates an uneven playing field. You have it just by nature of the fact that your points go up, the worse your condition your house is in. I don't think so. I don't think it's fair to say that it somehow makes it a level playing field. I don't think it does.
But why is that unfair?
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. I don't think that it's the point of that was Jay was suggested, at least from what I interpreted, when Kathy said that she thought houses that were in worse condition than others warranted it maybe more. I don't totally disagree with that. I mean, I don't totally disagree with that. But Jay's counter to that was, well, that's unequal. That treats the contributors unequally. A house that's in worse condition.
If it were in worse condition by virtue of the fact that we have this process, it would have more points.
Yeah, and,
Right,
and
but
Kathy
Jay-
may be able to correct this. I thought Kathy was saying that some houses are inherently of greater worth to the neighborhood, and therefore putting the money on those is going to have an impact, which I understand, but do think is unfair. So
That's not quite what I said. So for example, if someone came up wanting to preserve their minimal traditional, like I would be so on board with that because we have no minimal traditionals that I know of on the register. Spanish colonial revivals are a dime a dozen. I would expect you to make that case. The one that you just did now, I would make that case too. It doesn't seem to me, I mean, it is a competition. I don't know why that's somehow unfair in relation to this, to take that information into account along with these other objective criteria. Like it just,
the information about the style specifically.
the amount of work that.
Oh, no, well, I think that's what the point system is trying to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I said, like, I don't have a problem with the assignment of points. Like the point chart. I think that's helpful to know. And maybe there's tweaking around the edges.
I
to think
picture
about.
there being tweaking
Right.
every year as
You're
we
right.
get different projects that we didn't anticipate.
Right,
so.
but I don't have a problem with this. It's turning this into money, like and as though the economic value, the impact of that regarding the tax savings is the most important thing, and I don't think it is. I think it's important. I think it's something that we should keep in mind. But I do think that I mean, like the fact, it really bothered me that we weren't supposed to do site visits because somehow that was biased. Like, we always do site visits. We're always encouraged to do that. That was letting the points mean everything and not, and not the property mean anything.
Well, yeah, and it's
kind of
not
thing
our interpretation
that-
of what those points are either.
That was a call that we made. That's something we could easily revisit. That wasn't in. And I guess it's, probably in hindsight. For example, we don't have you do site visits on design review because we don't do site visits for DRB on design review cases or for council on design review cases. We tell everyone, and this goes back to the beginnings prior to my time, certainly, where we told people when we were creating historic districts or the Glendale Register process, there's not an additional hoop you're jumping through. There's just a different hoop. You're going to HPC instead of DRB. You're doing this in the same way. Your application fees are the same. Some cities have a completely different application process for historic properties. So that's kind of a side note, not quite applying to this, but just as a...
Is there anything for us, Jay, to approve with these point system?
No,
No?
this is why this is a discussion item. The
Okay.
idea was to kind of make sure everyone was up to speed on our current process. Nothing is perfect, but I think coming out of this, hopefully the idea that this point system is really to help staff give you our best assessment of because I do think this is about money, and I do think we're subsidizing people to do work on their house through a tax break that lasts forever on a non-historic property.
Okay.
That's not my
Well,
favorite.
I
It
don't
is
want
not
to be spinning around in-
non-historic.
It is non-historic.
No, it is not. It's a contributor to a historic district. It's a historic property.
Under CEQA, it's a historic property, but there's a difference.
It is a difference, but it's inaccurate to say that it's not historic.
Property that is not historically significant in its own right,
Right, individually historic, but
that's what I mean, so.
Yeah, but that's a,
No, I get it.
Well, I don't want to be spinning around on windmills here, going around with no point if we don't have to vote on this, or just for clarification. I think we all understand it very well. At least I do. We're just saying the same thing over and over again.
no, I think, Lorna, did you have
No,
more to say?
I didn't, I mean, I understand that there's subjectivity in everything, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And we do deal with a lot of subjectivity in what we do. So I personally don't have a problem with the point system. It's trying to put an objective overlay over, a very subjective process. So it's just an overlay. We need guidelines. And thank you for clarifying, Jay, that we have the point system as a starting point, but, we still can work outside of that and make decisions outside of that. To your point, Kathy, about counting prior work towards, the contract, I agree. I think when people buy their home, they probably do start doing work. But I would also want to make sure that, they've gone through the proper channels, gotten all of their permits, it's gone through the appropriate design review channels and all of that.
Just on that issue, do you want to, I can talk about, that issue came from our review of other cities' policies. So I don't have the list in my head anymore, but several other cities don't allow previous work to count toward the Mills Act. They want to make sure you have the contract, and then the city has some control over how that work is done. That's not something we can change right now. That's something that's been part of this proposal from the very beginning. So city council's looked at it twice, you've looked at it, we keep talking about it.
Yeah. And I'm okay with that.
But I do know, as each of you talk to your council members, and I would probably wait to see how this goes, and then we can fine tune it as we go forward. But at whatever point, if council wants to bring this back to formally fine tune, we'll do whatever they want us to do.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's all I really have to say. I'm okay with the process. I don't know what to say to your point about, we have so few minimal traditionals, and if somebody came forward, I don't disagree. But again, we're just getting into the really subjective realm there, right? We're just picking and choosing, and I don't know.
As long as if we can justify the choices we make, that's what matters. I mean, if we just say, I mean, we need to be clear, we need to have reasons for decisions that we make. And the point system is a way of sort of making those reasons really simple, but I'm not sure simplicity is necessarily the best guide in, in these kinds
I
of
think we have
decisions.
to have an objective starting point.
Oh,
I really
absolutely.
do.
No,
think we need-
I support the point chart.
Okay,
I just wanted
okay.
to say that. I think it's useful.
My problem with that is that I don't know that the interpretation of each of these line items is always the most objective interpretation. So again, we're only as good as the data we're being given, and if we haven't toured the properties and we're told that this is the state of the windows, or this is the state of the brick cladding, or this is the state of this and that, that is one person's interpretation of those things, which are subjective. So I understand the idea of having an objective point system that ranks some of these, or at least identifies, doesn't necessarily, forget the ranking part, identifies that there are inappropriate sashes, there are deteriorated sashes, there is deterioration to the mortar around the bricks or something like that, right? It's important to have them identified, just like things are identified when we're given a staff report about a register property. But what we have to accept is that is, certainly without a visit on our part, a subjective interpretation of those things. And I'll make the point again about the dollar figures. Unless those dollar amounts are really, every single one of them is specifically backed up with an estimate in writing and a specific description of the work, the calculation is just not going to
Well,
be
I think it's
correct.
supposed to be. You
Well, but
had,
in
that
some-
was in the, we're not supposed to talk about anything prior, but it wasn't,
And
you
there
know,
was one
all the
that wasn't.
estimates.
Let me,
and
let
the
me address
packets.
that without talking about anything prior. Some of the issues that you're speaking of right now are a result of kind of the compressed timeline of getting this thing going this year. I acknowledge that that was a problem, and we probably shouldn't have brought some things forward that were brought forward. In fact, maybe nothing should have been brought forward if we were going to do this the way we should have. The current timeline will give us plenty of opportunity. If someone submits an application by May 31st and we look at it and we say, hey, we don't have an estimate for this work, go get that before we bring you to further review. Hopefully they're going to do that if they really want this. We're not going to go forward with, oh, I think it's going to cost this much because I got an estimate at this point, and then we find out at a hearing that it's not even the amount that we were told it was going to be. That's not cool, and we don't want to do
Yes,
that.
right.
So if you can look at that situation as hopefully a one-off,
Well, okay.
or if it were to come forward, if someone said, hey, listen, I can't get that estimate, well, you guys can say, okay, well, then we're not considering that work item because we don't know.
Well, I would
And that would be fair, I think.
I think, speaking to Kathy's point, possibly, I would prefer, rather than being so consumed by what these things will cost, the point system perhaps can just reflect the total amount of work or items that need to be addressed. Like, for instance, this thing we just saw tonight had 12 conditions associated with it. That's a point chart to me right there. There's 12 points. And in those points, some of them had 5 windows that were being addressed, right? So we're not asking them to give, I'm not trying to suggest that this is apples to apples, but what I mean is, I don't think, at least for me, there isn't really value in how much someone is going to have to pay for these things. I work with plenty of contractors in my line of work, and something that one person charges for could be half what someone else would charge for. We have no idea really what ultimately those things will cost these people. But what we do know, what we will know, is what is the work that needs to be done. And if this homeowner decides that they're willing to take it on, whether or not they have estimates for that already, to me, is not consequential to the process. And I think it ultimately creates more work for you. And I'll tell you now, I guess, if what you're saying is that as commissioners, we don't really have to regard a lot of that, I probably won't be paying attention at that part. I'll look at the list of items, but every time I look at the chart with the 50% and the this and the that, my eyes glaze over. And so potentially saving staff time, I suggest that since this is more procedure than policy, that if this is not, it doesn't sound like we would have to go ask City Council to allow us to remove the dollar figure portion of the point system. It seems to me, among staff, you all could work that out.
City Council was presented with the idea that the work plan would include cost estimates for the work. And I'll just be honest, I disagree with you on this, because I think when City Council, you as HPC don't necessarily have to think about what's the best use of the police power and the efforts of the city to grant or not grant tax credits to people. But if I were sitting on council, I might be interested in knowing, like, well, if we're granting this contract and someone's going to be able to recoup the costs of whatever work was done in a very short time, yet they're receiving this benefit for a long time, and they're not on the Glendale Register, is that the right thing for us to do? So I think it can factor into decision-making, maybe at council level more than here. But in terms of changing it now, I don't think we can. That would be the kind of thing to talk to council members and see if there's traction with that idea.
By the
Because
way, I
can't
do
say it's
think
policy,
other,
but it's not just something we threw in there. It's something that was proposed. It's also based on what other cities do.
Well,
Yeah,
let's
and
talk
I
about
think
let's talk about what Anaheim does. They issue MILSAC contracts to Anaheim. They issue MILSAC contract. Well, you're talking about other cities. They issue MILSAC contracts to contributors, basically with no. Actually, they ask for all of the work to be done first. Then they issue a MILSAC contract, and it only still covers what's seen from the public right of way. So I appreciate that there are cities that do it one way, but there's cities that do it even more relaxed than we do it.
First time I've heard anyone from this dais compare Glendale to Anaheim.
Well, that's because I participated in the CPF thing, MILSAC thing, and one of the speakers was the planner from Anaheim. So you can thank yourself for that, Jay. And they have like 415 MILSAC contracts out in the city of Anaheim or some crazy thing like that. Second only to this, I don't even know. So
no, I
anyway.
think Pasadena is second to City of LA, and Long Beach is third.
Okay, well,
So
they're
it
up there.
helpful. The City of LA hired a consultant, Chattel, to review their MILSAC contract program in 2020, and they interviewed a lot of cities, and there's a lot of data and information in that extensive report. I think it might be helpful to look at that.
I mean, that was really just a point to Jay comparing us to other cities.
Just because I see you struggling with a lot of
Well, I mean,
this.
if we're going to compare ourselves to cities, we should know that there are cities that do things way more relaxed than we do them.
And there are cities that do it way stricter too.
Right.
So I think we're trying to find a happy medium.
Yeah.
I think at some level we have to rely on staff's expertise and feel comfortable that if Jay were telling us that, the sash was severely deteriorated, that it probably is. But I think we have an opportunity to ask for the definition. Of the interpretation, right? We could ask Jay, well, why do you think they're severely deteriorated?
Or not severely deteriorated.
Right, do we have pictures? I do generally support site visits. I would also like to do site visits for design review, like the project we looked at today. I mean, I just think site visits are helpful in all situations.
That's off agenda, but I will but I will check on that, but it goes against what I believe has been our policy for so long for the design review. Site visits in terms of the MILSAC contracts, I think that's something that's never been really discussed. It's never been put into a staff report. So I don't see why we wouldn't reconsider that. I don't want to reinvent the wheel for the current round, but for next year's applicants, assuming we get some, I think that's not a bad thing.
Those of you who are watching, you're reconsidering now.
We could go back, but what I was hoping to do was bring the current applications to you as soon as possible. So,
Okay.
in terms of window deterioration, just to there are degrees. If I can take a putty knife and a hammer and break through the paint seal and restore operability to my hung sash windows, that to me is not deteriorated sash. That's painted over sash that takes 20 minutes per window to do that. Maybe you need a new sash weight, maybe you have a broken sash cord. To me, that's maintenance, not deteriorated. Deteriorated is when you have dry rot, when you have parts of the sash that are falling apart. The glass is wobbling because it's not supported.
Sorry, so what is that if it's not maintenance?
What's that?
Well, you said that,
Deteriorated
Deteriorated sash.
or maintenance.
okay.
That's where you have to hire a specialist to
Okay.
come in and perhaps build you a new sash or perhaps put a new bottom rail on your sash. It's something that you don't just hire the handyman or do yourself necessarily. These are, subjective thresholds, but I think that to me that's key. That's why I put replace inappropriate sash, meaning someone replaced the windows with something horrible and we're bringing something back that's right for the property. Repair deteriorated sash, what we just talked about. Or if the window is so deteriorated where you can't just replace one rail, the whole window is gone, that's replacing in the whole thing in kind. So
I just would like to add something to that. Having lived in a house where those pulley windows did not work, and it's not windows being painted over. That to me is not just a simple maintenance thing. And I worry about people replacing windows they can't operate with just a replacement. And so I would like those to be given some kind of acknowledgement in the point system. If it's just that someone painted them over and then no, that wouldn't count.
You don't
But if
know
there's
that.
a broken,
Yeah.
well, why not go
We don't-
inside?
No.
Yeah.
We don't know it until they've cut them loose, whether or not they were painted shut because they fall or.
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
no,
I mean,
that's a
they're
good-
not just usually.
paint over anything that doesn't move. So.
Okay, so I go into a lot of houses. Don't make me start with this. I go into a lot of houses that are very old and that have these issues all the time, and I have buyers that cut them open and only to discover that the windows don't stay up, or they have, and it's. Replacing a sash cord is not as easy as it sounds. That's certainly not a weekend project for me. The whole thing has to
Yeah.
be taken apart and da-da-da. It's all very complicated to me.
I used to do that as, I would say, maintenance, and I'm coming to fix things. I'm not, this, we don't have to argue
done
about.
it.
Well, I mean, I think to
we're
her
not-
point, sorry to interrupt you, but to your point, I think a non-functioning window to me is deteriorated. It's not, in my mind, that isn't necessarily maintenance. That's actually broken. Maintenance is putting some oil in there, making sure it goes up and down really easy all the time. Broken sash cords is not maintenance. That's broken.
In preservation, when we talk about restoration of things, we're talking about restoration of physical materials, not the operability of windows. That is a thing. That's something, people want to be able to open their windows. Most people who have double hung sash never even open their upper windows, even when they're functional, because it's just not what you normally do. But, whatever, it doesn't matter what I've done. But
is there any
this
more-
is, point taken, and we can change that, because that's for next year. If we're gonna keep a level playing field, we're not gonna reinvent everything in the middle of the current applications. And I'll give it 1 point. Just
Thank you.
kidding.
Okay,
Appreciate
all
it.
right. We're all walking away happy. Thank you, Jay. Was that A, B, and C we just covered? Or just A?
No, if you're done with your questions, that was just A. The others are very quick.
Okay, let's move on to B.
So everyone good?
Yes.
Okay. So, you may be curious where we are with the Historic District streamlining process, which went to council last month. And council, like HPC and like TGHS, approved it, basically felt it was a very good proposal. Council did ask for a few tweaks that we're going to bring back when we go to council. So the next step is we write new code amendments to reflect the changes that we proposed in the staff reports. The 3 tweaks are that we're going to give council an option in terms of the percentage of the percentage of home properties that sign the petition for designation, what used to be called the second petition, which will now be the only petition unless other circumstances come up. So those options are 50 plus 1, which is the current method, and that's actually not correct. It's over 50%. So we would be able to, it could turn into 50.1 plus 1. That's not how we've referred to it before. And the other one was to go to 66%. I'm going to round that up to 67% because that was the intent of the speaker, the council person. So those will be two options presented. So when I'm writing the code, I'll have those in there highlighted. You guys have to choose. There was a strong direction to improve communication between, since we're eliminating some of the door-to-door, neighbor-to-neighbor, knock-knock, here's some materials. We're going to improve communication both in the distribution of materials that go out with our noticing, and then also on our website, just making that part easy. That's going to be part of the website upgrades we do before the end of the year, so hopefully that website part of it will be clear. And then once we have a district in process, we're going to have a separate place, a separate landing page for that district. See, I'm learning new things all the time. For information about that district that we would then reference. One of the council members said we should use QR codes, and I think you had mentioned that also, Lorna. So we'll do as much as we can. There was also discussion about languages. That wasn't fully resolved. There was discussion of every single document being translated into 4 or 5 languages, or doing what we did with the brochure, which was also at council's direction, to just put a little section in 4 or 5 languages that in that language says, for more information, call this number or go to this website. So we have to determine which way council wants to go on that. And then there was also a recommendation that we develop a way to verify the signatures of people signing petitions at staff level. And that's part of some ongoing internal discussion. So I'm not sure what direction that's going to ultimately come out to. And I'm not even sure if that would need to be written into code or not. So we'll work with our staff and legal staff to figure out exactly how that's going to go. So that was good news overall, that 5-0 vote to approve what you had already approved unanimously.
Can you remind us which meeting that was that you presented? Was it this past Tuesday?
No, it was last month.
Last month.
I don't have the date in my head.
Okay.
So.
Also, Jay, did you say,
It was after our meeting.
November 1st?
did you
Casey's
say,
the memory bank of this operation.
Yeah.
So.
AC in Paris.
oh, good for you. Jay, did you say we would have
Did I?
another
And I said last
opportunity?
month, and it was only 2 weeks ago. No.
Yes, 2 weeks ago.
God, that's weird. Okay.
Yeah.
great.
Did you say we'd have another opportunity to review any of that before it goes to council, or does it just go back to council?
It goes to planning commission, and then to council.
And then are those percentages, is that something they decided on and those are kind of set in stone?
No, they wanted those as options that they'll consider. So this would be the time to speak to your appointors or whoever else.
Are there any other options that are possible for that?
Like splitting the difference?
100 options if we use whole numbers, but
So
I'm thinking that I'd like to suggest that maybe it's more of a tiered approach based on the number of homes in the proposed district, with the higher percentage for, districts above like maybe 500, and then a middle group that's maybe 200 to 5.
my brain always goes to equity issues, and I'm not sure I know what the answer is for that.
Okay.
I would like to explain, just say a little bit about how the conversation went. There were 3 council members who were strongly in favor of leaving it at 50%, knowing that if you increase the number, even though applicants have, there were numbers 80%, 70, 75% thrown around. Even though I think all but 2 of the historic districts have gotten to 70%. The problem with increasing the numbers is that you decrease the number of applications you're going to get, because as we all know, or those of us who've participated, it is so daunting to get those, to imagine getting 50% plus that one, because it's not even getting people to agree, it's finding people at home, finding both people, finding all the owners of a property. And it was 2 council members who had this stuck in their craw, and at the end, Artie said, let's just look at 66%. He picked a number that someone had sort of made a line in the sand. But this number does not need to go up, and I don't think, I like adamantly think that it should not. Because that number is just the threshold to get to council. It's not, doesn't get you over the finish line. There's still an evaluation that takes place. It just doesn't go forward unless you've made that 50%, which is why people work so hard to get more than that number.
Oh, and
Well,
as Kathy said, there's, that's true, the split, but the ultimate vote was to include the options, so we're going to include the options, we have to. And we require a 4/5 vote on a code change. So this, do what you do.
Why was Mike Garcia saying it only required 3?
I don't remember that, to be honest.
Oh, yeah, he said, I think you only need 3 votes.
I think he said that too. I do recall that.
Yeah.
I thought code amendments
So did I.
had a higher threshold.
Yeah,
We'll verify that, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
No, that's fine. I mean, I do have my own opinions on this, but maybe maybe this isn't the time to be discussing them.
Well, no, this is just an update, we're not making any decisions. But you all know who to talk to if you have concerns about anything. So the new code will be, made available to the public when it goes to Planning Commission. As you know, you can write or testify to the commission as seated members or members of the public, so your voice can still be heard.
Thank you. Moving on to item 8C.
8C is the Historic Design Review Process Overview. We are going to do that. It hasn't been our top priority. I don't think we're going to get that for December. December is going to be tight, just getting end-of-year stuff together. And so I would say in the first quarter of 2023, we should be able to pull that together. Last month, we talked about I was never exactly sure what the goal, not the goal, but what the focus of this would be. And Kathy talked specifically about windows, so we'll definitely be focusing on that. We'll probably give a more general overview on other issues. I just don't know how specific we need to get on a lot of our standard design review, process. But we'll explain it, give you the overview, focus on windows, unless there's anything else anyone needs to hear as part of that specifically.
I'm sure there's walls and roofs and driveways and stuff to consider. No?
Well, I would like to know more generally, like, what are projects that just we don't see? I mean, like some examples, and not just windows, but like how is the new historic preservation ordinance, which changed a lot of the language, how is it being applied? I think that's what I'd like to see.
We all know for windows how it's being applied, but for other things it's being applied
exactly the same as well.
Differently.
Okay. I had one, just a question before we conclude. I was hearing some concerns about getting historic district signs up in Casa Verdugo.
We're working on that. That's not agendized, but we're working on that. That's been a funding question.
Okay.
But it's going to happen. So.
Right, but it's a question. I don't think it needs to be agendized to answer. Just say you don't know when it's going to.
No, we're working on it.
Okay,
Working on
but
it.
you don't know when, because you're.
No, we're
okay.
working on it. Yeah.
Work in progress.
It's going to be soon, and I've been in touch with the people who are asking about it. So.
I was asked to ask.
All righty.
All right. Any other closing comments?
None?
None? All right. At this time, before we conclude our meeting, adjourn. Wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you in December.
Thank you. Yes. Happy holiday.
Thanksgiving.
Bye, everybody.